Okay, shall we get started? Okay, so welcome everyone this morning to the Santa Cruz Library's Facilities Financing Authority Board meeting. We have a roll call, please.
Chair Martine Bernal.
Here.
Vice Chair Jenny Hauriyama.
Here.
Jamie Goldstein.
I think I'm here.
Nicole Coburn for Carlos Palacios.
Here.
Great, thank you. I don't think there's any additional materials. I don't think there are any additions and deletions. Oral communication, is there anyone in the public who'd like to address the board on item that's not on the agenda but is related to the work of the Library Financing Authority? Library Facilities Financing Authority? No? Okay. Move on to item 5, which is Executive Director Report. There's a...
You can see it's part of the JPA packet.
Yes. So there's a written report in the packet. Anybody have any questions? I think it's just information, no action. Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment on item 5, the Executive Director Report? No. Then we'll move on to item 5, project updates and comments by board members. This is project updates on the various library projects.
I guess the only update I would have is in Capitol, we are taking our plan for our new library to the Planning Commission tonight for permits.
And then moving forward with construction documents at that point.
Yeah, after we get through that, then we'll kick in the construction doc phase.
So in the county, the Felton project went to the zoning administrator on Friday and it passed. So we have our development permit to move forward.
That's great.
Yeah.
I guess I could do an update. We've had our downtown library advisory committee, who's had a series of meetings looking at. They developed a scope of the program for the main library branch or the library branch here. I think it came out to around 48,000 square feet. 46,000 square feet, and then they've adjusted it a little bit to 44,000, which fits the building. Then we had Nolan Tam do with the engineers and do cost estimates of the different options, and which came back and really I think shocked everyone in terms of the expenses. So the one option is the option to remodel this building was $37 million. We have 23. The option to tear this down and build a new building here, I think the 2-story with a deck model was $49 million. Then the third option, which is to do a shared use project with the housing, parking, and office over at the farmers market site, was $26.5 million, 27 million roughly. The library committee then said, well, what can we do with our 23 million? So they asked Nolan Tam to go back and come up with an additional option to do something within the budget here, and they came back and presented that at their last meeting. And that was pretty horrible too. Essentially, it was, and Susan, you can add if I miss some things, but essentially it would be only been able to remodel about 35,000 square feet of the building, not the entire building. It would not do any changes on the outside except for ADA access ramps. It would not replace the roof, the HVAC system. It would replace the plumbing and wiring.
Electrical bathrooms.
The elevator. So essentially, it didn't include the furnishings. It didn't include.
I think it had a small budget just for updates. But
Right. So it was really more of a. It would look more like a new carpet and paint in a portion of the building, essentially. So it would be. So I think people found that pretty unacceptable. So the next step is they went through and did a pros and cons of each of the different options, which is I thought they did a really, really good job, very objective, really thoroughly examined all of those things. And then what's going to happen next is our city council and the committee is visiting, touring libraries. They're going to go to Los Gatos and look at the library to get a sense of what a modern library it looks like as well.
on Tuesday.
On Tuesday, that's right.
At 9 a.m.
That's right. So then they're going to come back and look at finalizing the recommendations to the city council. In the meantime, we've worked with the farmers market to identify an alternative site for them that they really like, and that's been developed, and we created some really nice plans with the pavilion and all kinds of things that they really want for the farmer's market at the corner of Cathcart in front, which is that long parking lot. And we developed some very, very nice sketches and drawings. So they're I think, pleased and happy with having a permanent site. But it'll then come back to council early next year to make a final decision on which project to pursue. That's it. Okay, great. Consent calendar. We have just minutes.
I'll move consent.
Second.
All right, we have a motion in 2 seconds. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. That's unanimously. Or, sorry, are there any comments? No. All right. Next is general business, and this is LFFA financial update. Ian, is it here?
Yeah, good morning. My name is Dave Zweig. I'm the treasury manager at the County of Santa Cruz, and Edith Driscoll is not able to attend today. She's in an association meeting. So she presented the staff report that reflects the balances for the bond proceeds. I did notice a little bit of a, maybe I recommend you make an amendment. There are 2 places where it says September 31st, so that date doesn't exist, so it should be September 30th. So on the front staff report, and then also on the table, the 3rd column in the table, that should say September 30th, not 31st. So I don't really have any comments. It's pretty much self-explanatory unless there are any questions. She told me that there have been no draws. So that's really not much to report.
So this is probably on by request, and I think the only factor, the only thing that I would like this board to think a little bit about is I know that we've all refined our project timelines and our draw schedules and maybe found other revenue sources for our projects. So for example, the Capitola branch is a $13 million project. We'll be using $8 million of bond funds. We'll be breaking ground on construction in June, we anticipate, of next year, maybe mid-May. So depending on sort of the best way to proceed, we can draw bond funds early, we can use our general fund earlier, we can use our RDA funding earlier. The sequencing of when we actually use the funding will depend on, really frankly, interest rates, cash flow, things along those lines. But in my conversations with Edith, I was led to believe that we had a draw schedule which showed us potentially pulling money out of the bond fund sort of starting immediately. And my thought was, if we were to refine our draw schedule a little bit, are there options where rather than getting 0.6% or something, I'm not exactly sure what we're getting on the bonds, the $21 million we have in the bond fund, if we said, okay, we really aren't going to begin to draw it for another 6 months, if we could bump that by 100 basis points and end up with $200,000, or I guess it'll be $100,000 over 6 months. So I just wanted to toss that out there as an opportunity. I mean, obviously, we need to value preservation of assets, number one. Liquidity is also highly important, but we initially put together, I think I did for one, put together kind of a best case draw schedule with limited other availability of funds. And given where we sit today, I just kind of wondered or wanted to toss out to the board the prospect of, if we knew we weren't going to use it for 6 months, was there another vehicle that would potentially generate money? I understand that Capitola is only going to get $8 million out of this, so I'm just really speaking as a complete board member here. And at the end of the day, if we are able to get some returns on the 21 million, 22 million that we have, it really kind of comes at the back end of this process. We're all going to get the distribution that we agreed to in the original allocation. If there's extra, then we'll talk about what to do. But as a system, it seems as if extra would only help. So I think that's kind of the impetus behind this. I'd leave it to the group for other comments, or I guess I could pose a question about if there are other opportunities.
Sure.
That would, maintain a high degree, extremely high degree of safety, but still provide the liquidity we needed if we were to push out our draw schedules a
Right.
little bit.
I'll just give a real brief summary on that. The first thing you have to do is adhere to the bond documents. So whatever the bond documents say that you will invest in, that's where it should be invested in. Second thing, I'll just put in a disclaimer, it's not within my purview. So the money's being held, as you know, with Bank of New York as the trustee. So it's not in the treasury, so I don't have any control over the investments of those funds. The fund that you're invested in right now, though, is a money market fund. It's called a 2A7 type money market fund, which is extremely conservative, as you've noted. It's earning about 0.9%, but I would say that the spirit of those proceeds are to be spent for the public good, and that they're being held in the correct manner, only because they're being held in treasuries, agencies, repurchase agreements, and so on. If you had a longer timeline, or you had a longer horizon, if you were using those bond proceeds for projects that were going to extend out 5 to 10 years, I would say yes, there's definitely some benefit to that. But I think that the incremental benefit that you would get to take additional risk for this short a period of time is probably not worth it. But again, this isn't within my area because I don't have any control over these funds, nor do I monitor them. So I would defer that to Edith, that question, or of course you guys can make what decisions you want.
Yeah, I would just add that in talking to Edith, the way it's set up, we can't pull the funds from Bank of New York, so they have to stay invested there. In future issuances, we could potentially change who we're holding the funds through and look at it differently. But these draw schedules are part of the bond documents, and my understanding is that we should try to adhere to them. And I know the county plans to draw down the bonds as soon, probably starting this year. So we're going to be drawing them down for our expenses and using PAYGO at the back end, which they're a little bit more flexible than the bonds. So that's our intention, and overall, we have a 3-year period to draw down the funds. So it's not as if we have a long horizon to increase the earnings off of them.
So, if that is the case, then what we will do is actually prioritize drawing these funds, because if they're at 0.9%, I think LAIF is beating that right now.
Correct.
It is.
So then I would keep, the general fund contributions that we're putting into the project
Right.
to the back end.
Correct.
Yeah. That
you know
would
what I
be, that's what
Use
we
these as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
if that's the option, that's the option. I was curious if there was another one.
We can definitely take another look at it from my understanding for the next 1 or 2 issuances. If we
Yeah, I think
choose
it's
to do
to see an
something.
update on the scheduling too, because that can change there.
Yeah, because I didn't know if the Bank of New York had, super conservative A, we were in that, super conservative B, and super conservative B was a 1.5 or something like that. And, if we said, okay, well, we could deprioritize these funds and use other things that are at LAIF that are earning a little bit less, but if your suggestion is this is the choice, this is the option, this is the draw schedule.
It is given your bond documents from what I've reviewed, and also the conservatism or the security, the prudence of investing the funds, I think. I do recall looking at the different options and advising Edith. Again, I'm not involved, so I didn't direct anything, but there was very little difference in yield between the different options that Bank of New York is offering. So given the constraints that Bank of New York had, there just weren't that big of differences. But it's, as you said, this is extremely conservative, highly liquid, and I think that's prudent given your charge.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, any other questions? Any comments for the public on this item? Okay. So maybe we just kind of keep updated on focus on the next round. Okay. just schedule a coming meeting, which is December 7th. And finally, adjournment. We'll adjourn. Thank you. Okay, we now begin the Santa Cruz City County Library's Joint Powers Board Authority regular meeting. May we have a roll call, please?
Chair Bernal,
Here.
Vice Chair Jenny Haurama,
Here.
Jamie Goldstein,
Still here?
Nicole Coburn for Carlos Palacios.
Here.
We have a presentation? No presentations? I don't believe we have additional materials. I don't believe we have any additions and deletions. Oral communication, this is a time for any member of the public to speak to the board about any item that is not on the agenda, but is related to the scope of the library JPA. Anyone like to address the board? Alrighty. Next is the report by library director.
No additional comments. Sorry. Rancho 40 celebrated their 50th birthday.
Oh, that's right.
Thought I would pass this around. There's some lovely pictures from the past. We had some of the original librarians who worked in the building show up and tell some pretty awesome stories. It was a really wonderful day. I want to point out that next year the entire system celebrates its 150th anniversary, and so we'll be planning a series of events with the friends to celebrate that. I think it'll be an opportunity to build on some of our fundraising campaigns as well. 150 years, it's quite an accomplishment for a community.
And it was built with a bond measure. 1964. Wow. Okay. Okay. And the report is in the packet, pages 47, if anybody's interested. Is there any member of the public that'd like to comment on the library director report? Any questions? No? Okay. Then we'll move on to the next item, which is report by Friends of the Santa Cruz Public Libraries. Hello, Maureen.
Good morning. So we're working on two things this season. First is the season of book sales. Our first one is downtown Civic this Friday and Saturday. The next one will be at La Selva Beach on Saturday, November 18th. And then we'll follow that one up in Scotts Valley on December 2nd. And in Capitola, we're trying to open up a little kiosk at 44th Street Mall to sell books. So we're seeing if our insurance and everything will cover that. On the other front, we're working on trying to build skills. So next year we can hopefully start on the building campaign. We're meeting with Stephen Slade, who's the executive director of the Land Trust. He's giving us a workshop on cultivating and soliciting major donors, and that'll be next week. And then we're working with Cosmic, which is a marketing firm down here, and trying to get our marketing together for next year. And that's all I have today. Any questions? I do want to say that MOU has been signed by all bodies.
That's right. That's right, yeah, thank you. That's great. Yeah, Cosmic is really great too. They did our economic development webpage. They do really, really great work.
Yeah, we're really excited. And also, talking about the MOU, then the Friends of the State Parks called me and they wanted to see a copy of that because they'd like to see if they can follow through on one for themselves. So.
Thank you. Are there any comments from the public related to the report by Friends? Okay, thank you. Next is a report by Library Advisory Commission. Do you have a report?
There's no report. We're only meeting quarterly, so I think we're meeting next month.
Okay, that's right. The next one is October. Okay. This is under- okay. Great. Are there any comments by board members? Next, we have the consent calendar.
I just wanted to ask about the performance measures. performance indicators. It was interesting to me, the change in circulation, and then also that the visits to branches are up, and I was wondering if there was anything else you could say about that in terms of why that's taking place, if the visits relate to where we extended the hours.
I would love to say yes. I think 3 months is not enough time to really make the public aware, even with advertising, of the additional hours. I think it's helping particularly in places where we added like a weekend. We're seeing some major numbers. So in some branches, I think, have been impacted differently than others with the new hours. I think what you're seeing nationally is a trend away from circulation of books. And if you look at our digital circ, it's growing at a very fast rate. I also think, though, I'm not 100% confident in our data. We had a staff day in October where we talked about data as a group and the need to improve the quality of our data and to use it more locally. So we're really just starting down a performance indicators process. And at this point, I'm not 100% confident in what we're doing. Though I think it's probably a good indication of the direction things are going. I think there's a lot we can do to improve our stats. I think our stats are below what they need to be for this kind of community. But I think there's a lot of factors that affect them. But I think you'll see some significant changes as the buildings improve. Thank you.
Should make a difference. All right, are there any other comments or questions related to items on the consent calendar? Are there any comments or questions from the public related to the consent calendar?
I'll move consent.
Motion a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay, that passes unanimously. Next, we move on to the financial forecasts, and that begins on pages 53 of your packet.
And this was a response to the discussion around the appropriate use of the fund balance. So we are blessed to have the marvelous Marcus to talk us through the latest updated forecast for the libraries.
I don't know how to respond.
You can say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Super Susan.
There's some colorful charts in there too.
So in February of this year, the board went through a kind of a live modeling moment where we had the ability to play with our model and change our assumptions. And so that data has been, that same model is what we're using now. That's largely built on actual spending patterns and not full budget authority patterns. So this has probably got a higher degree of credibility when you look at your out-year forecasts that are based on what we expect to happen, not full maximum budget authority. We've forecasted and updated our model to go out to 2021. And since February till now, probably the biggest two changes are PERS rates have gone up and not down, PERS increases. But healthcare we've lowered our growth assumptions on healthcare. So while we've increased our expected growth rate on pensions, we've lowered our expected growth rate on healthcare. Pensions, in the new actuarial reports provided by CalPERS, the increases were significant over the long-term horizon. When you get to 2021 versus today's dollars, you're looking at about $800,000 more a year just in the increase in pension costs for the library system. That's a large number of an annual increase year to year to year, 2021 forward. So that was a big change. I think the prior models had about a $550,000 increase. So there was a significant change in our out year assumptions. Healthcare for the calendar year 2018 from CalPERS, the employees within the library systems are members of the CalPERS Health Agency. Rates for 2018 are projected to be flat that bucks the trend where we've seen annual increases on the aggregate of 7 to 9% per year. So that was a big change in assumptions. When we drill down into the library personnel, they're because choice patterns within the portfolio of health plans dictates cost to the system. The library themselves traditionally have lower cost growth than, say, the general employees of the city of Santa Cruz. The library employees are a subset of the city of Santa Cruz. But for whatever reason, the employees' choices are keeping costs within a reasonable growth pattern. That reasonable pattern has been closer to about 4% a year. We've lowered that assumption down to 2%. That might be too optimistic, but to go from a 7 to 9% annual growth rate to flat, maybe the increase in competition, the increase in development, the increase of more providers in the market might keep rates more competitive going forward. So we've lowered our growth rate assumptions. Getting back to pensions, we think that's a credible rate. We have a high degree of faith that will happen subject to legislative changes. But healthcare, we could be wrong on that. We could revert back to 4% growth rate. So that's something that we'll have to pay attention to. The other thing in our model that we've increased is the expected rate of growth in materials, books purchases. We plugged in a 4% growth rate in the total annual purchases. Traditionally, the actual's been less than that. Traditionally, what the system expects to spend in materials and the budget authority is higher than what they actually spend for a lot of different reasons. They're trying and they're getting there, but sometimes purchases take a little bit longer. They feel more like a capital program where you invest money and over time you'll get there, but you might not get there in a 12-month period. So we've plugged in a 4% growth rate in materials. That might be, there might be some budgetary savings there in actuality. We might not actually hit that level of spending. But that being said, that's just words. The forecast model is included in your staff report. The assumptions are laid out, and there's the bottom line is the system is still projected the same deficits as we roll year to year to year, starting as soon as the year we're in now, close to a $500,000 deficit projected out to $1.7 million in 2021. And the impact of that is drawing down available reserves that by 2021, if everything stays the same and no changes are made, by 2021, there is no available fund balance left. Today's fund balance is gone, and $1.3 million of reserves will be depleted to make up for those cash shortfalls. So that's just a general overview. There's certainly a lot more details in the staff report. Questions?
First question I had is you're showing the MOE growing at 0% through the entire forecast period?
Yes.
I thought that there was a fixed amount that the Santa Cruz MOE was increasing.
So let me clarify that. We've built in the exact contractual MOE rate.
Okay.
Well, I should footnote that more clearly.
I understand what
So
you're saying.
we've built in what we believe it to be based on our contract. But we're expecting that to stay the same. There's discussion about that might deviate.
That makes sense. So you have an actual number there. You're
Yes.
not growing that actual number.
Correct.
That's right, because the agreement, when does that agreement expire?
It's like
That's coming
5
up.
years, 2021 is the last
Through the end
year.
of this month.
Through the end of this model. It's growing by 70,000 a year.
And the other thing to note, and this at times is a pain point, is the administrative services contract that expires at the end of this fiscal year. We built in a 5% growth rate on that. The contract is basically a personnel cost, contractual agreement where the system relies on City of Santa Cruz administrative support, which is personnel. And in general, we see those costs at around a 6% growth on total. So we plugged in a 5% growth rate just as something. Understanding that that's to be negotiated, discussed, consideration. Yes.
In your model, you're showing 17-18 as that we're deficit spending. My understanding was we adopted a balanced budget for this fiscal year, 17-18. Help me understand that.
When we look at where revenues we think are going to be what we thought, the sales tax is largely predictable right now. The MOE is absolutely predictable. we expect spending with the increase in staffing that was done within last year, and another $300,000 in one-time spending, that those together will, as shown as expenditures, are going to put this year in a deficit, which was expected. Those increases were expected to come from fund balance, so that's what's driving the gap. While your operations were budgeted, when you factor in those spending patterns
The
from last year.
the one-time expenditures we're talking about.
Well, the staffing's ongoing,
And
but
the pilot.
they were funded from
Right.
But
reserves.
the pilot was included in that operations budget.
Yes,
And we used fund balance.
but it was funded by fund balance. So,
Right.
So we're balanced, but we're funding it with fund balance.
One time, right, and that was, yeah. Right, when we discussed that.
This year's budget? I thought that was the initial implementation. Thank you.
Other questions? Objections? Are there any members of the public who'd like to comment on the projection? No? That's the most fun part.
no, I should have added to where we think this to be a credible projection, but we're forecasting a decline in sales tax growth. Over the last many years, it's been a pretty robust 3%, 4%, 5%. We're bringing that down to 1.5% and 1%, 1.5% for this year, next year, and then 1% in the 2 out years. If the economy keeps going strong, maybe that will be low. But we expect a couple things. There's a general decline in the taxable base of sales tax. Plus, we're expecting some level of an economic slowdown. While it's not happening yet, it's hard to ignore in the next 4-year period it might be. So that is a place that we'll probably be on the more leaning to the conservative side, but I think right now it's realistic. The current projections that we're seeing across the board about a 1.5%, 2% for today's dollars. So I think today's projection of 1.5% is reasonable, but certainly if the economy has a restart and a strong boost, and sales tax countywide, sales tax could come in better than we're projecting right now.
So that does lead to another question for me, I guess. The sensitivity of the model, if you ran it at, instead of a 1%, 1.511, if you ran it at 333,
In which years?
I don't know,
There you go.
put the 1920 and 2021 at 3.
You go to 1 million deficit in 20 and a 1.4 million deficit in 21.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, it's slightly better, but I think we were looking at somewhere near 7% growth rates to really eat in. No, that doesn't do it. I can't remember the number.
Is the marijuana going to have any impact on sales tax?
Hard to tell. I think it's very modest. What would be more meaningful is if there was a special rate specific to the library, like the jurisdictions are doing. But I think if you're just thinking of the sales taxable value of that, medical marijuana is non-taxable. So retail would be. Hard to know what the retail market will ultimately be countywide. I don't think it'll be meaningful enough to really move these numbers significantly.
I just wanted to add on sales tax, so the 1.5% in this year, next year, that's what HDL had been talking to us, and those are the assumptions we had used for the Library Financing Authority, were around those numbers for this year and next year. So it's in line, his numbers are in line with what we have budgeted right now.
And we'll see the first quarter of this year coming up in about 5 weeks, right?
So that
6 weeks.
the actuals, I just sent out an update for the first quarter, so it's slightly higher. It came in slightly higher because the September true-up was higher than what we had thought, but October payment is very, very close to what we had budgeted, so.
But we see the true up in December.
Yeah.
The complete
So it's
picture of the first
coming.
quarter, yes.
question I thought, in 1920, 2021, we would need 15% and then 9% growth in 20 and then 21 to kind of cure those deficits, so it would need some pretty significant growth.
And if we were to just flatten that out, you'd have to see 7% a year basically across the board, approximately.
Yeah, it's the same issue, challenge that we're all facing. The cost increases is just so significant relative to.
Yeah.
And the property tax base is no longer part of the funding scenario, so as property tax base grows, that doesn't necessarily feed the operations anymore. So now it's one revenue. One revenue is where all the growth has to come from to fund all new costs, increases our new programs.
Marcus, I guess it's here, on the fund balance chart, when you get down to the negative there on 2021, that's based on the 15%, I guess it says, or the budgeted reserve, right? So that draws down the budgeted reserve.
Yes.
And then it goes over that, right? 434. Okay.
You would end up with about $700,000 of available resources by 21, which is
Right.
pretty modest for the size of this budget.
Right, right.
Could use
Okay.
the word scary, but I would say modest.
Right, and we'll talk next about the unbudgeted.
How much of that equipment reserve is taken out? You
For
said it
planning.
dips into, on 2021? Is that absorbing it all, or you're negative 1.34?
In total, there's $2.5 million approximately, $2.6 million, I think is today's correct number. So if you take that 2.6, half of it will be consumed in 2021 if nothing else changes.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I don't think there were any questions from the public or comments on this item. So this is informational to bring us to the next item on the agenda, which is the options for the use of the fund balance. And I think we're talking about the, in large part, the unrestricted fund balance, which is above and beyond the budget.
And the discussion really focused on whether we could use a portion of the fund balance to enhance projects. So our fund balance really is $2.68 million in addition to our reserve. I think there's 4 ideas that have come forward. One by actually increasing our budget reserve by 5%, so bringing our budgeted reserve to 20%. That costs about $700,000. That's give us more coverage for the pilot program that adds hours. Using 1.2 million, or that could be really any amount for capital projects. And we showed an example of how that money could be distributed using the current distribution methodology that we have for Measure S. I think the difficulty about this is when you spend 1.2 million on 10 projects, it doesn't provide any individual project a large sum of money. There's still the concept of using the resources for green building enhancements. And we are doing a system-wide study of what bringing solar to all 10 buildings would cost. But we don't have, I think we're just starting that. And then the last thing that came up last time was the concept of using funds to leverage fundraising for the capital projects as well. And I know the Friends of the Library are developing a proposal that they'd like to present to you next month. So the question for you is, at this time, do you want to make any changes in spending to the unfunded, or the fund balances? Excuse me. Jamie, I know that Capitola had some immediacy to their concerns.
I guess a question for number 4. I understand that there's not a proposal in front of us right now. Can you give me a order of magnitude on that? What that may be? Are we talking about 50,000? Are we talking about 500,000?
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I can answer.
Sure.
We don't have specific numbers, but I would think it's somewhere
I guess once we get to 2021, that becomes a structural deficit, right?
Well, we have structural now.
Right, well, yeah, right, I mean, it's.
But by 2021, your available flexible
Right.
reserves are gone.
Right, and so.
And you're
we'll-
dipping into your actual reserve.
Yeah, right, but we'll have to sort of figure out how to keep things balanced, regardless of the fund balance, I guess.
So I would just say that in light of what Susan and Marcus presented regarding the potential economic downturn and the potential need to keep or desire to keep the public hours going, our preference would be to explore number 1 and then also number 4 in terms of looking at the proposal to hire a fundraiser, because we think there could be a benefit to that, both in the short and long term, in terms of what that person might be able to generate towards the capital campaign, and then just on an ongoing need, creating some additional funding for the library for services or programs or other needs.
I would tend to agree. Capitola is, it's hard because at this stage in the game, Capitola is dipping into its general fund to fund a gap to build the library. And so, to some degree, I'm talking about, deficit spending now or deficit spending later. I could certainly be talked into using a chunk to be allocated back to the capital projects, understanding that limits our resiliency going forward. But at the end of the day, if we have to plug more money into the system, we have to plug more money into the system down the road, or have to plug more money into the library today. So I can certainly be talked into doing something along the lines of number 2. I think number 3 I put out there as earlier in this process, because at that point I don't know that the other jurisdictions were feeling maybe the same pinch of funding constraints associated with building the bond measure projects that we were. I think that pinch is hit home at some of the other jurisdictions, and so I was trying to push that out there as kind of a way to use one-time funds to help with the long-term structural deficit as something that would reduce kind of the library's ongoing operations costs as we look 5, 10, 20 years out by investing some of the fund balance. So I still would be interested in 2 and 3, but given the longer-term projections, I can also understand the notion of setting that aside. Open to other concepts from board members.
Jimmy, I still think there's value in understanding the scope of what that would mean.
Item
This
3.
Long-term planning, I think that's something we need to consider.
I have concerns with the first 2. While I really appreciate the pilot program, I'm concerned about managing expectations of putting money aside and having that designated potentially to continue the pilot program when we may have other issues that would arise given the forecast. Selfishly, on the capital projects, there's not a significant benefit for Scotts Valley. And I think to Susan's point earlier, the economies of scale don't necessarily, the order of magnitude here for everybody's benefit is not significant in my mind. I am open to looking at green enhancements. I'll be curious what the results are, particularly only from the standpoint that if there's a significant return where we're going to be reducing or saving costs and the investment is worth it, I'd be interested in learning more about that. And then also, I think number 4, I think there could be some mutual benefit there, but I would need to see more information on the scope.
Okay. Let's see. With respect to the first one, I agree that tying it to the pilot hours might not be a good idea. I think certainly beefing up the reserves, I think, is a good idea. But whether we tie it or not, we probably need to have flexibility and not tie it. So I think that's a good comment there. But I do definitely think we do need to increase the reserve. 2, that's attractive to me too, just again because we're having issues there, but not obviously at the expense of the system. not that interested in 3, at least. I think we can maybe look at that in the context of our individual projects, or maybe once we get back the report, we can sort of see what the payback might be for certain facilities and that sort of thing. There might be a better economic argument for 3 if we get more information. 4, that also seems attractive to me insofar as trench leverage. I think, like I think others have said, I think learning more about what that would entail and what the program would look like would be helpful. Those are my thoughts.
So I think what I'll do is come back next month. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. All right, so those are, any other questions? All right. Members of the public, if you have any comments on this?
My name is Nancy Gert, and I'm speaking today as a member of Felton Library Friends. Number 2 is very attractive to us, as I know it is for other projects that are seeing a shortfall. And I think I understand with the previous presentation that we're looking at, maybe some rocky years ahead. However, our project is very close to getting the library that we really want. And it's been a long time, and we feel that we just need a little bit more for that final push to really get the size that we're going to need. It's already undersized. I know Scotts Valley, we have the same population for our school kids. And and our library is just a mile from the library. Our library will be a mile from the school campus. And so, knowing what your library has, endured in the afternoons, we expect much of the same. So size is really critical for us. I really like number 3. I don't even know why all of our projects aren't solarized right now. I appreciate the Scotts Valley's comment on, doing the math on it. But I really feel like the county's trying to move forward in the green element, and I think that's an interesting idea. We don't have it in our budget to do solar because, we're trying to build the building. And number 4, I also really I like this idea with the sort of caveat that some of us are in a time crunch, 2 projects right now. So if there's a way in the proposal that's going to come forth next month to include, I know it's really difficult to include projections or estimates or all of that, but in this process, if you do end up choosing to hire a fundraiser with some of these funds, that there'll be funds that go to both the Felton and the Capitola project somewhere next year. And because we're in crunch time right now, and so I think it's going to be great for the projects that are ahead in the next several years. And I just think we need to include all the projects that are in the chute. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
So
Just make sure anybody else like to comment on this item? Okay, go ahead, Susan.
based upon your comments, I think we'll come back with a recommendation to increase the budget reserve to 20%. We'll fully calculate that out so you can see the consequences. We'll do that for next month. We'll definitely move forward with the green building study, and we'll look at the presentation in December on using funds to leverage fundraising and present a proposal to you at that time. What's not clear to me from this conversation is number 2. So I definitely heard some mixed perspectives, but I also heard some interest in doing this, and so I think I need a little bit more direction about that component.
I didn't prepare to make a motion. And see if we can actually get some direction, firm direction on this. Number one, I would move number one, the recommendation to increase the budgeted reserve by 700,000, striking the to preserve public hours of the program. Really, this is going to be reserved to help us weather the next economic downturn. Number two and number three, I see as potentially directly connected. You know, if you were to come back in December and say, hey, it looks like for about $1 million, we could, you know, over the next 5 years, install solar on each one of the facilities, that's going to save the library system $300,000 a year going forward, it starts to look pretty attractive to me. And I would hate to say, hey, we're going to move number two, basically funding for capital projects, albeit both in Capitola and Felton, we have the need today to do that today and preclude three down the road. So I guess my suggestion would be that we kind of punt out 2 and 3 pending seeing a little bit more where that solar, the data come in on that. And at this stage, as you suggested, I'm open to seeing a proposal. I would note, though, the point the public speaker made is that, you know, for Capitola and Felton, it may or may not be very helpful just because of the timing of our projects. Nevertheless, to the extent that as a system we're stronger and as a system we're raising more funds and we're able to, you know, obviously Maine has an enormous problem. I suspect Aptos is going to be faced with very similar, if not more significant challenges down the road. So I'm interested in seeing that proposal, understanding that it's you know, a little late for some of us, but still looking at it. So to clarify my motion, number one, striking the restriction on the use of the reserve, and then number 2, 3, and 4 pending the information that we'll see in December. And I think December is going to be kind of a drop dead date for us, at least in Capitola, in terms of making a determination on our final financing for our project. So that's my motion.
And I would just add that although I didn't state it, I think we are interested in seeing the study on the green, on the solar, because there's a long-term benefit to the potential benefit to the library system. So if we could come back and review further information on that and proposal for the fundraising, I think that would be helpful.
Okay. So any comments from board members? Questions? All right, go ahead for the vote. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye? All right, that passes unanimously. All right. Thank you. Moving on, let's see. Next on the agenda is library internet use policy.
And so this is just a first version. We like to bring it to you 1 month and approve the following. And it really is a statement to the public about our expectations around the use of technology in the library. Most library systems have such a statement.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the use on the report earlier of internet use and computer use. It's pretty significant. This branch in particular, like half of all the computer use in the system is right here.
And we started a queuing system here, the digital queuing, and we have hit capacity even with the new computers, so
Wow.
it's been a popular service.
So one question about the library's Wi-Fi. I know increasingly we're all becoming aware that when you're using a public unsecured Wi-Fi, there's a danger in using, transmitting personal information on it. I guess I would encourage the library, you know, the policy clearly states that the public should be cautious when using it. That said, it's awful easy for me to just open my Outlook calendar here real quickly if I was connected to it and just not even think about it, and it's potentially my work email address, like Mr. Podesta, would be hacked. I'm tethering off my phone, but But I guess in terms of best practice, I don't have any problem with the language that's in the policy, but in terms of best practice of informing the public and reminding them of that, maybe there's something that the library can do about reminding patrons about the fact that the Wi-Fi that they're using at the library may be fast, but it is unsecured.
We'll do an exploration about how to do that.
Yeah, I mean, you remind people a lot. It's
Is there any sort of a notice that they get when they log on to the Wi-Fi? Because I know that's common when you're out in public. And then you accept it, saying you accept.
What I don't think we do is require that every time, I think. So, I need to explore that.
Okay.
The other thing I think is some print signages, some signs within the building are probably appropriate as well. But there is, I'm sure, a best practice that we can probably.
Yeah, I think it does have one, at least initially, called the library one goes.
I think Amy knows.
Know a little, not a lot, and Lynn is not here. We can look into a captive portal, the possibility of a captive portal, which is a use agreement when somebody logs onto a wireless network, but it's a free and open network, so that might be difficult to implement. If you pull up your wireless technology and look at available wireless networks, Santa Cruz Public is right there alongside the library. And so I think that probably the best practice will be some additional signage in the branches so that people see it. There really isn't an easy way to manage open networks.
You don't have any? Maybe I'm thinking about the other one that we have at City Hall, because we have two. Okay. Okay, all right.
So we'll bring that back next month for your approval.
Any other questions, or any member of the public would like to comment on the internet and wireless access policy? No? My gosh. Alrighty. Thank you, Susan. Then the next item is the discuss library director's upcoming evaluation. And I think here, I think you're due next month?
Next month.
So I think, I guess we could do what we've kind of done with some of the other JPAs, which is the chair takes on the role of doing the first draft of the evaluation, working with the board members, and then presenting it to Susan in our next meeting. So,
You look puzzled.
Oh, I don't know that this, yeah. Usually you do these in closed session, but yes.
I'm assuming it would be closed session
Okay,
next month.
yeah.
But
it's
this is
process.
just preparing you for.
Okay.
The
Chair,
process.
go forth.
All right, so that's the process. I will do a draft and get it up to you guys. All right, any public comment on this? Nope, okay. Then item 12 is scheduled upcoming meetings, again, December 7th. And item 15 is adjournment. Thank you very much.